your moderator for this program. The theme of this webinar is why improve tax administration and how ICT trends leverage the institutional development. It is part of a SIA ongoing series of webinars showcasing the flagship publication ICT as a strategic tool to leapfrog the efficiency of tax administrations, a project supported by the Gates Foundation. The free publication is available for download at www.cia.org and at several other sites such as libraries from Amazon, Apple Books, and Kodo. We have over 100 parties registered for this event from 36 countries, and we're certainly hope that they could access the entire session without any problems. Basically, we're covering the globe from Central South America to Asia, Africa, the Pacific, and Europe. So we definitely have a good coverage of the world countries. We will get started by getting information from our speakers, and then there'll be an interactive polls distributed during the webinar. We will have a pause of 10 minutes at approximately 30 minutes into the webinar. Participants will be able to send questions. Those will be answered once the presentations are complete towards the end of our program. The microphone and camera will not be open for the forum. We have today 5 speakers who are well versed on today's topics. The first 3 speakers will make their presentations aided with PowerPoints. And the second half of the program, we have the good fortune of having 2 executives, head executives from international tax organizations. Specifically, they're Mr. Marcio Verdi from SIA and Mr. Babatunde Aladapo from WATAF, the West African Tax Administration Forum. As I mentioned, there'll be a break halfway through the session. And at the end of the presentations, there'll be a question Q&A session. And before we conclude, we would like to get your evaluation of the different your input as to the specific outcome of this session. As I mentioned, I'm Socorro Velasquez. I'm moderating this program from my home in Fort Myers, Florida. I've been involved with the SIA organization for the last 11 years. Prior to that, I was with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Let me introduce our speakers. We have Mr. Marcio Verdi, who is a Brazilian national and currently is the executive secretary of the SIA organization, as I mentioned. We have Mr. Babatunde Aladapo, who is the executive secretary of WATAF. These 2 organizations are member of the NTO, and a network of tax organizations, of which we have other international tax organizations. They will be our speakers towards the second half of our program. We have our initiating speaker, Mr. Santiago Diaz-Aralde, who is a Spanish national, right now transmitting from Madrid, Spain. And he was also a member of the SIA organization. And as you could see from his CV, highly well-regarded economist in the field, in applied fields, and currently also a university professor. Our other speaker is Ms. Claudia Suarez, who is a member of the SUNAT for a good number of years, and very involved in that organization in Peru, and held several very important positions throughout the government in Peru. We have Mr. Raul Zambrano, who is from Ecuador, and he is also a CIAT director in the area of technical assistance and technology. Mr. Zambrano is well-versed in the area of tax administration as well as technology and leads many of our projects regarding tax administration improvement processes. Before we continue, there's a quick questionnaire here. If you could tell us where you're at. Okay. Okay, I hope we got plenty of information. Let's move on then. Let's do, well, we got the reply here quick. Oh my goodness, 88% from the Americas. Africa with 12% and Asia, and we're still waiting on a few of the others. I guess they'll be getting into the system fairly soon. Well, let's continue with today's program, and let me then open up the first session, which is with Mr. Santiago Diaz-Aralde, and he will speak on why improve tax administration. This is a very important topic and occasionally is taken for granted, in particular by jurisdictions who heavily depend on income from natural resources to fund their governments. At some point, we will reach the bottom of the barrel, literally. So let me pass it over to Santiago. Santiago, please.
Thank you very much, Socorro, and thank you very much to all the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think that the best way to try to answer this question, why improve the tax administration, is to make ourselves a different question. What do the prevention of malaria, the efficiency of the financial markets, access to clean water, a reliable judicial system, safety in the streets, or the maintenance of the transportation infrastructures in a country have in common? And well, apart from the fact that they are desirable objectives, all require financing and significant collective action. And here is where the tax administrations play their role. Tax administrations are the bedrock and one of the pillars of all modern states. And what do we know right now about tax collection? Well, what we know is that the existing inequalities on income in the world show a high correlation with the public resources in different countries. Just watching that and knowing that the average on high-income countries is above 31%, while it is on 17% in low-income countries, we can be aware of the difference. And it is not only the level of tax revenue, also those tax structures are different. The significant difference focus mainly on, while the OECD or the developed countries contributions on social security and individual income tax represent a high share, in Africa or Latin America, consumption tax prevails with a much lower contribution from direct taxes. And this has an impact. These differences in the public resource and structural levels unavoidable condition the government's acting capacity, and in particular their effects on the improvement of inequality. Advanced economies manage to reduce the difference through taxes and public tariffs by 30%, while the developing ones barely improve inequality by 8%. In this scenario, tax administrations of less developed countries face enormous challenges for doing their work. Just as an example, the workload with which they face is inversely proportional to the income level. And this in spite of the fact that tax administration's budgetary effort is even greater in the poor countries, as we can see in the right side chart. Well, as an unavoidable result of this combination of factors, the efficiency of tax administrations is much lower in the less developed countries. Even if there are a lot of inconvenience and critics on this index, it shows us how the cost of collection reflects this reality. Every 100 monetary unions collected require a 1 unit administration expense in high-income countries, as compared to 3 times higher cost in those with low income. Well, according to this context, tax administrations in developing countries face enormous challenges, and they cannot wait until the level of global progress in their countries may allow them to adopt the traditional procedures that have been applied by most advanced countries. That's why, in order to take a qualitative leap and shorten the distances, they must directly adopt the more advanced procedures and technologies. Some of them could be payments through mobile applications, not having to rely on the development of a complete banking system, the development of a cadastre with satellite support, without waiting to count on an army of experts to visit every plot of land, the establishment of electronic mailboxes rather than trusting in urban planning and mail systems that may determine the geographical location of taxpayers, electronic invoicing, instead of the capacity for demanding and controlling enormous amounts of physical documents, and computerized information and taxpayer assistance systems, without waiting until having the capacity for providing assistance in physical offices. And we have good news, because such a leap should be based on the experience of those countries that have undergone similar situations. Unfortunately, we can find a lot of these cases in different regions, such as the countries who belong to SIAT organization. In the chart below, we can see the implementation of basic electronic services in tax administrations. And even if it is clear that there is a higher level of implementation in richer countries, we can see how a lot of middle income countries have gone through experiences in different aspects, like via web support tools, online services, electronic invoices, electronic mailboxes, especially as electronic invoices. The leaderships are not among the high-income countries. There is a clear evidence that some Latin American and African countries have successfully implemented some of these leapfrog actions in terms of the use of technology and improving tax administrations. Some of the examples that we can mention would be the generalization of electronic filing of tax returns. In the right side table, you can see the percentage of tax returns received by electronic channel, and it's amazing the figures that we can find in countries like Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, etc. The use of electronic invoice and other electronic documents, and again you have an example in the left side table, or the wide use of mobile payment, especially in Africa. Well, being brief, here it is the why, and here it is the way. ICT as a strategic tool to leapfrog the efficiency of tax administrations, what we are going to talk during all this session. Thank you very much, and I give the floor again to the moderator.
Thank you, Santiago. Claudia Suarez is our next speaker. She will address the topic, designing a tax administration strategy for the new times. And these recent months are certainly new times, since all of us are facing issues as a result of the pandemic. I don't know of anyone who has a playbook on how to proceed with the future, but certainly the past provides us some ideas on how to adjust the future. And with that, I pass it over to Claudia. Claudia, please.
Good morning, everybody. Over the few minutes, I will share with you some aspects of interest, reflections, and learned lessons on the process of designing and executive the strategy of the Peruvian tax administration in recent years. A strategy that incorporated the use of information and communication technology, these ICT tools. I would like to begin by asking a question to all participants of this webinar. David, we can set the question, please. You have a question on your screen. Please answer according to what you believe and click send. Well, we have the answers. Most the participants believe it's very necessary, so we'll see in the next slides. Generally speaking, the main objective of all tax administrations is to achieve the collection that the country needs to cover public expenditures and services for the benefit of its citizens. This main goal is stated in a specific amount of money or in the tax burden. Of course, to meet that goal, the tax authorities formulate the strategy. In formulating that strategy, the tax authorities, top or senior management in charge of the strategy should analyze two main aspects. First, as we see, the reality in which it operates, meaning the characteristics of the government and population, characteristics of the tax administration itself, characteristics of the public and private institutions related to their work, as well as risks, among others. Second, it's important to analyze the desired future, its mission, vision, synergies that are possible with related agencies, opportunities, and threats. Such analysis will show inevitably that ICT tools, with its changing dynamics and its presence in the every simple thing we do every day, has irreversibly changed the way we produce, we sell, it means we trade, we work, and we communicate. Also, these ICT tools enable mass production of data, which quickly transforms into information, one of the main assets of tax administrations. So some reflections we can extract on this point is to get a successful incorporation of ICT into the strategic planning process, it is important the tax authorities, top or senior management that designs that strategy understand these new ways to produce, trade, work, and communicate. Second, know about ICT tools and the level of evolution they are in because they evolve every day. And third, spend enough time to understand the advantages these tools offer. Otherwise, ICT will not be used to its fullest potential or simply will not be incorporated. Next, David, please. In the Peruvian case, the strategy includes three strategic institutional goals to get effective tax collection expressed in the tax burden. First, improving tax compliance. Peruvian tax administration is looking forward to the transformation of taxpayer behavior towards timely voluntary compliance. The mechanism used to achieve that is risk management and innovating communication. Among the strategic actions for this goal, Peruvian tax administration set the massive use of electronic invoices and the integrated tax current account as tools that Santiago mentioned previously. The second main strategic objective is reducing compliance costs. Setting strategic actions to implement new automated, simplified, and remote service. For example, a chat box that we call Sophia, or the digital services center that now are mandatory because of the quarantine time. Third, the strengthening internal management capabilities, enhancing financial and administrative management processes to precisely support the achievement of the two previously mentioned goals. Some considerations that we have in mind in formulating the strategy. Next, please. In the process of defining actions to improve tax compliance or reducing the cost of meeting tax obligations, it is interesting to think about incentives that go beyond the traditional role of tax authority. We think? I think it's necessary to provide taxpayers with services and products that allow them to be more efficient and competitive in their business and professional activities. In that way, taxpayers, especially in countries with high levels of informality, can see advantages of being formal. These services and products can be built by tax administration with the information it already has and ICT tools. For example, based on electronic invoices, which is what we have, for example, in Peru, and with the use of an application created for that purposes, tax administration may offer to a small business an inventory control system. These businesses, small ones, will be grateful because inventory control is one of the big challenges they face. And for the tax authority, this will be convenient because we'll be able to carry the controls and determine the payments that are due. It's benefits for everybody. And this is important because go beyond the traditional role of the tax authority that pre-file tax returns or just electronic invoices or just put mobile applications. A second important aspect to consider is the degrees of technological development and connectivity in the different regions of the country. Since especially in Latin America and Africa, there are inequalities inside the same country. Likewise, in countries where there is a lot of centralism, as this is the case of my country here in Peru, we tend to think only in the reality of the capital and ending up deciding strategic actions that are only able to be implemented in one part of the country. And a third consideration is that there must be a conviction and also leadership within top management to incorporate the use of ICT into the strategic planning process and the daily work of the institution in order for it to succeed. When the strategic objectives has been set, next one, please. Once the strategic objectives has been set and in order to correctly define the actions that will be implemented to achieve each of these objectives, it is important to have a comprehensive approach, in fact, more operational, to the areas in which it's necessary to intervene to implement the use of ICT, as well as the areas that interrelate and whose progress depends on each other. If there is not this global look, which involves the whole organization, there will only be isolated efforts and the results will be poor. We say it by experience. In our case, we identify 6 areas in which we should work simultaneously. We cannot go into the details now because of the time, but we are going to mention fast. Processes, of course, they must be digital. Interoperability with other state entities, companies such as utilities, or even other tax administrations from other countries, with the purpose to access, process, or exchange information automatically. An example of both aspects together, digital process management and interoperability management, is given with the use of national identity for tax purposes, because it's not necessary to create a separate tax identification ID, what most countries do. Another example could be the use of facial or fingerprints biometrics to perform any tax procedure. The tax authority does not have fingerprints, of course, but requires them as a form of authentication on its application using directly the databases of the corresponding government entity at the time. In that sense, both entities needs to be connected, interoperate. I will risk and digital competences management for the end, since I have additional comments on them. As for the relationship with the taxpayer, it is important to improve the user experience using mainly applications for mobile devices and artificial intelligence to provide proactive services that anticipate user needs, all with the purpose of increasing the taxpayers' responses related to actions of the tax authority. On the communication side, it is important to use social networks, and in countries with low levels of tax awareness, the use of influencers, popular young people, can be extremely positive. Even now, I was talking with some colleagues in the tax authority here, and they were thinking on using short videos in TikTok, which is the new, the recent platform that young people are using to create awareness about paying taxes. To make all items mentioned before work, of course, we need technology. So having good platforms with good architecture and strict secure protocols is essential. Next one, please. I wanted to make a couple more comments on risk management because based on the experience we had in Peru, it has a high potential for improvement with the incorporation of ICT tools. The large amount of data available today and the ease of processing with these tools allow us to design more efficient tax management models and more complete tax data models. In consequence, preventing the taxpayer from defaulting, which should be the main focus, or regularizing will be more easier. This item also includes the work of data scientists whose mission is to develop behavioral algorithms to detect evasion, as well as formulate risk profiles that include identifying deviation from typical behavior. What is achieved with the incorporation of ICT in this field is to substantially improve the efficiency of the models, especially when we talk about a management model of the tax in the whole process of the tax and magnifying the tax administration scope. For example, if we can do 10,000 or 20,000 of induction actions in one period of time, now we can do 1 million in the same period of time using the same resources, increasing in this way the level of control and induction and then the tax collection. About digital skills management. Next, please. This part is refers to the transformation of organizational culture to incorporate the use of ICT as part of the institutional work. This transformation must be led, of course, by the top management, which must speak openly and honestly on the subject. Managers and employees are sometimes the root cause of delays in ICT adoption processes. Lack of knowledge, fear, or not being able to adjust to the new technologies, or the threat of certain jobs disappearing are a few of the obstacles institutions encounter. So, to minimize such resistance, it is critical for people to understand the benefits of using ICT tools. To that end, the following actions should be carried out. First, allocating process management responsibility to managers who are ICT savvy. Establish training and awareness programs on ICT. Introducing a new recruitment policy that ensures profile has technological awareness. Transforming progressively the way in which the institution interacts with its employees, adopting technology as a driver of a new digital culture. And this last part is very important because it involves even all aspects that we consider sometimes irrelevant, such as even the clothes people use to work, how the offices are organized, how we can get connected like these virtual meetings, and even the colors we set in the walls of our buildings. I would like to finalize with some reflections that for us were learned lessons in the process of implementing ICT in our strategic process. And the first one is, next one, please. Given the large number of existing ICT tools and considering that resources in terms of money, workers, or time are limited, strategic actions to implement should be prioritized based on the benefits they bring and their availability. Many times we want to do everything, and at the end we don't do nothing. So we need to select and be aware about the benefits we can get from the tools we want to implement. Second, ICT tools are changing, so it's necessary to be updated and have flexible and agile digital transformation plans. They will change every month. Plan monitoring tools then must be also agile. In our case, the plan in words are flexible, but when we try to implement, it's not like that. So we need to get the right instruments to allow go fast with the introduction of ICT tools, and the changes are necessary to modify the strategic plan. Relationship with the interest groups should be well managed to avoid them from becoming an obstacle in implementation of ICT. For example, we have with the implementation of the electronic invoice, we have conflicts with some accountants unions and also with printers, because of course they lose some kind of job. So having plans to reformulate the kind of work they do is a smart measure that we did delayed, but this is a lesson that we learn in the process. Articulate with other state entities to generate synergies in the ICT field. A low level of coordination among entities can cause duplicate efforts, wasting public money and resources, and this is against precisely our goal, because we want to collect money, so it doesn't make sense that we waste the money for lack of coordination. So this is the experiences I wanted to share with you. So thank you for listening, and I give the pass to the floor. Thank you, Socorro.
Thank you, Claudia. Great information. And now, next is a colleague who is basically the essence of technology, Mr. Raul Zambrano. He will address the subject of trends and new technology tools for early adopters, a path to improve tax administration efficiency. There are several world leaders in the use of technology for tax administration. Often at GI conferences, they share their experiences with members and assist others in finding technology solutions to a complex issue. So let me pass it to Raul.
Thank you, Socorro, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us wherever you are over the Zoom platform, and also to those that are joining and assisting this event through our channel in YouTube. I will cover topics that are presented in our book that you can download in chapter 15. So if you have any interest of exploring a little extra on those subjects, please go ahead and download the book. It's for free, and you can download it from our site or from several stores. First, I would use this time while you answer this question to answer a question from one person from the audience. What about interoperability? I will try to put that in a very short way. It is the ability to make two different information systems not only talk, but cooperate. A short example in our site, for instance, let's think about a system in the prison system in a country. So when you go to jail, that system would immediately notify the system in the tax administration about that fact, and that could be considered into the risk management facilities to raise a flag if that person is receiving income. Just an example. So it's more complex than that, but just to give you an example of how interoperability could work between different information systems from different parties. So the answer here, we see that it's advanced analytics and artificial intelligence are the choice of many of our participants, but also Internet of Things and APIs are second. So that's very interesting to see, and we are going to talk a little bit about many of these things. So what about advanced analytics? Many of you are already involved with what is usually called within the industry as business intelligence, but advanced analytics we should consider when the 5 Bs are involved. Large amounts of data, variety of data coming not only for structured, but also unstructured information, like for instance, those pieces of information that could come from Facebook or news in the newspaper, articles, pictures, video. The velocity, because those pieces of information could reach the tax administration as they are happening. So very, very fast. But that information needs to be reliable And of course, it should be useful for the tax administrations. Otherwise, you will keep getting lots of pieces of information that would just be sitting there using space. So what we can do with the information first, of course, is descriptive analysis to understand what happened and what taxpayers did, and maybe identify insights of evasion or bad behavior from some taxpayers in the past. So that's very interesting and useful. But the next stage is to use that for diagnostic purposes. So to understand why that happened, if there are loops in the law, if there are failing connections in the systems, if there are things that we left in the open, maybe cultural things even, that were the reason that facilitated that bad behavior from the taxpayer. So that will move to a predictive analytics, so to anticipate compliance issues that we will meet from a set of particular taxpayers. And the next step, which is very challenging, but we should focus to that step in the near future, is prescriptive analytics. So what we should do for a particular set of taxpayers to avoid that potential issue of compliance. So one example of the use of advanced analytics and big data in the tax administration here, we in the lower part of the diagram will see lots of information from electronic invoices and that will be arriving, as Santiago mentioned, on the billions of documents to the tax administrations. They are arriving at an impressive rate of several hundred documents per second at moments in the day. And we will use those techniques to do things on real time. For example, immediate detect probable fraud, or to do advanced analytics to manage risk, for example, using economic analysis behavior, and also to create new things. That's the case of using that system to pre-fill VAT returns as is being used in Chile and more recently in Ecuador or Spain. And that's amazing if you think that you can pre-fill the VAT returns of all taxpayers at the end of the month. It's a very short time with many situations to be considered, and that can be and is being done right now in some tax administrations in the region. So what about artificial intelligence? Some examples that can be used in the tax administration and are being used right now. Another example from Chile is to all those pieces of information that comes in the lines of the electronic invoices that describe products or services being exchanged can be analyzed using machine learning to understand what exactly those elements are, and if to identify if they are related or not with the economic activity of the taxpayer, and to understand if that credit is valid for that taxpayer. So I am going to exaggerate a little bit, but a hardware store should not be claiming credits from going to the hair salon. That's an exaggeration, but it clearly shows the purpose of this facility. That can also be used, for example, in the UK to customize mass collection of information and link over 20 sources to treat 1 million debts at the same time. And here is this slide is from the Mexican Tax Administration, where you can see that 40 million documents coming from requests from taxpayers, 600 million tax returns, 10.5 pieces of statements, financial statements coming from taxpayers, and 32 billion documents from electronic invoices were put together to produce thousands of electronic audits. That would be impossible to do by hand. Otherwise, you would need a lot of information. The next piece of technology that's a lot of interest around is blockchain. Blockchain, and we should start saying that it's very sexy because it offers a lot of potential. But when we see the things from the side of the tax administration, we should consider that not necessarily everything that can be done should be done. I mean, of course, a lot of interesting things could be put in a blockchain. That means a distributed registry that guarantees that information will not be changed. Not necessarily is public. So unlike, for instance, Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies that all the transactions could be queried, it could be closed proprietary private blockchains. But even then, there should be a reason to justify when you are going to pay the extra cost of replicating information in several places to keep the information unchanged and accessible to those interested factors. So when we should use blockchain inside the tax administration? Well, of course, that will be a matter of opinion, but in my opinion is when processes have participation of other parties, not only two. So for instance, tax returns that involve a taxpayer and the tax administrations are perfectly handled using traditional information systems because there are only two parts involved. But there are more parties involved. It would be very interesting to have a blockchain. So for instance, and we will talk a little bit about a couple of examples. So the second point is there is no centralized point. So not necessarily that point or there is a part that is trusted by all parties. So a couple of examples, customs, the logistic chain can be automated. There is an example in Peru and South Korea, Singapore, that are using a blockchain. So producers, importers, distributors, transportation companies, brokers, financial institutions, insurance company, customs, ports, and other government regulators will leave a mark of the different participation they have in the process of imports or exports to be available for all interested parties to query, and that guarantee that there will be no change at all. So that is a very interesting usage of blockchain that is being currently implemented in several parts. In tax administrations, there are two very interesting examples of in both federal countries, in Brazil and Argentina, that are using blockchain to facilitate information about taxpayer registry. So other tax administrations or other government entities at different levels of the federal government, so states or municipalities, could know for sure that a taxpayer has been registered and the details of that registration, so that could be shared among the country without the burden of exchanging daily updates from one place to the other. That was the previous way, and trusting a private blockchain. It is not a public blockchain, a private blockchain for the usage. So here is an example of what can be done with a blockchain. And we see here a vehicle registration ecosystem where we have the customs, the distributor, the traffic tolls, and of course, the tax administration, in many cases, the municipal tax administrations that would collect taxes for those vehicles. So it is part of a complex environment that the blockchain could facilitate that kind of support. And I will end this part of the presentation today talking a little bit about Internet of Things. So those are things that are connected to the internet and that can be used for tax administration purposes. And you may wonder why, but if you think in excise taxes, like the gasoline distribution, you could put or by the production of alcohol or other beverages that could be subjected to an excise tax, you could put sensors at different parts of the production process or the expenditure of those products to the public. And those could immediately transmit over the internet information to the tax administration. That's, of course, the first level of how these things can go. Then let's get back a little bit to the vehicles example. Pieces of technology inside cars could transmit to different parties, including the tax administration, the police, or other government agencies, information of when they are being exceeding velocity or speed, regulated speed, when they are parking in a certain place at a certain time, and if that reflects in a penalty or a new tax that could be directly linked to the usage of resources. That's not necessarily something that will happen, but could happen. And when the use of artificial intelligence comes to our life in more different aspects, like virtual assistants and so, those pieces of software, those intelligent machines that could interact with humans providing services, for instance, could also be connected to the tax administration, reporting on those services delivered. And that could be used for tax administration purposes to determine taxes that should be paid. So with that, I'm giving the floor back to you, Socorro, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Raul. Wealth of information there. Let's take a short 5-minute break and then return. And we still have two very excellent speakers waiting for us, Mr. Marcio Verdi and Mr. Babatunde, and they will speak on very interesting subjects, also dealing with the same topic of technology. So we still have 74 participants with us. Let's take a short break and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we're back. I mentioned we continue with the next two sessions, and they will be from the executive secretaries of CIAT and WATAF. So let's hear from Machiavelli. He will speak on the CIAT vision on how ICT will continue transforming tax administrations. For those new to the CIAT organization, the CIAT Secretariat has been assisting member countries in the area of information technology since the mid-1980s. And that support has continued over the following decade. So let me turn it over to Machio. Machio, please.
For organizing these webinars. Actually, we have a fantastic material. No? We have a complete book on the use of information and technology. I would say we have a true flagship. And webinars are indeed an excellent tool for dissemination and discussion of its contents, especially on those very difficult days that we are living right now. No? And I would like to congratulate the speakers. We had a great presentations, especially the Claudia talks about the points that I would like to mention in on my comments. But answer your question regarding CIAT's vision on how the use of information technology will continue to support the transformation of tax administration. Actually, in my mind, what I can say is that without an effective and permanent use of computer resource, it is almost impossible to think of working effectively in the fulfillment of the mission of the tax administration. No? Obviously, and we all know this, for the tax administration do what they have to do, the first thing is an effective legal framework, and obviously to a minimum of material and personal conditions. But the availability of all these resources, the legal and human and material, will not be effectively without a policy on the development and the use of information technology. Because nowadays, a tax administration is a big database, very big database. So if you have a resource, you have a good legal test, legal mark, but if you don't have at least a minimum standard on the use of information technology, it will be very difficult for any tax administration to fulfill their goals. No? And to achieve this condition, to get a modern information system, Claudia did an excellent presentation. But in many cases, we don't need to have right now, as Raul showed us, a tax registry using blockchain technology. But you need to have a good registry, a system that works on the registry and is the same for the current account. Maybe you are not using the state of the art, but you need to have a basic standard, a basic one, no? Which works, allow you to work effectively. But to do this, at least this minimum standard, we need to review in many cases our priorities in terms of investment and the use of resource. No? Well, the first thing we need to realize is to recognize that the informatics is fundamental today to reduce the cost of the tax transaction. Claudia presented this very well for us. That is to reduce the cost of the taxpayers' compliance and the cost of the tax administration itself. No? What we call this two side of the coin, we call the tax transaction cost. No? I would love, and I could go deeper in these aspects, but I prefer to go directly on the point that worries me the most, Socorro, which is what we have to do to reduce the knowledge gap between tax administrations. That's the big problem when I look for America continent. We have countries with a high level in the use of IT, but we have others that they don't have at least a minimum level that we consider that is important. And I think this is a role in which CIAT can and should contribute to reduce the gap of knowledge. And I am not talking about equalization, harmonization, we all have the same level. No, but at least what we need to do to decrease the level of inequalities between the tax administration of our member countries in terms of the use of IT. And to do this, I think we need to promote the notion, the necessity that the tax administration, and Claudia presented this very well, they have to work on and implement, not only work and keep this on a shelf. They need to implement the use of information strategical master plans. We need to plan, no? And this, so I think CIAT and the other tax regional organizations should do, is to promote the awareness that the implementation of a computer science department is very difficult to be done without a medium and a long-term plan and without a political support of the authorities. This is because we don't need only a minimum of computer research. No? We need to have the capacity, even if it's a small one, but to invest in hardware and software and in development of solutions. But to do this, we need a medium-term plan that could contemplate our visions, a medium-term vision and goals for the use of IT. For example, how much money you need? It's a huge problem. If you have research for these years and no idea about the amount of research you could have next 2 years, it's very difficult to you to prepare any bid, to contract any company or to do a leasing, etc., if you don't have a minimum medium-term vision of what you need and what kind of research and the amount that you have to use. And this is not easy, because if we don't look for the future, we could fail into a very common mistake. And that is, what mistake I'm talking about? Is when we have a minimum combination of human and material research, but this research could take care only of the day-to-day operational activities. And this day-to-day consume all those research. And this is very common in many tax administrations, especially in those from small countries. When you have if you have 500 employees at the tax administration, or 300, it's very difficult to you to have 100 working for IT. So it is such challenge to have a development division inside the tax administration, especially to have an IT department. And I think that here comes the role of a technical assistance, of a third-party support in the modernization of systems and solutions. And CIAT, as many of you know, has been doing this during the last 3 decades. And I think this should be one fundamental task for all regional tax organizations, to collaborate with the countries on the technical assistance, to facilitate the implementation of technical assistance. And I think that we need to look for those technical assistance done especially as a result of bilateral collaboration between tax administration. You can hire the best private company, and I have nothing against to do this. But once you receive a collaboration from other tax administration, things are not only cheaper, but easier. But it's difficult to get this married. So organizations like SIA, Toyota, PITA, TAIC, CATA, we can do this function, not to promote the bilateral technical assistance or even multilateral technical assistance. No? To conclude, I think we must be clear in our minds that without external support, it's very difficult to move forward. But normally, we will do so on the same knowledge base. Without a external support, Socorro, we can move ahead. We can move, but normally in a very slow process, only in the same curve. I think it's only with the external cooperation will allow you to burn stage, so to jump more easily to another level of knowledge applied to the tax administration. So these are my first comments, and I give you the floor again. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Marshall. Very informative, very important information. The next speaker that we have scheduled for today is Mr. Babatunde Oladapo, the Executive Secretary of WATAF. And Babatunde, if you don't have your video camera turned on, please turn it on. And with that, let me pass it on to Babatunde, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. Okay, here in Nigeria is good afternoon. Good morning to you out there. And it's really exciting to be here again with SIAT. You're doing a good job. I appreciate your effort. And yeah, I've been following keenly the presentation, and I would like to say at this point, tax administrations, the future of tax administration it's going technological. ICT, it's an enabler for tax administration. When you look at the whole process, we start with registration, filing, and then making payment. The role of ICT is actually out there. It's a business enabler that we need to take serious. And at WATAF, that's also something we've been promoting and like Marcio mentioned, working together with partners to make sure that we benefit from the advancements and successes others have recorded in that regard. And the presentation are focused on several areas, which I think I will just highlight and then look at the issues. I'll just talk briefly about the issues. So in terms of collecting taxes from different businesses, you find out tax administration needs ICT help. For instance, when you look at Uber, one of the largest transport companies in the world that doesn't own a car but operates online. The tax administration needs technology to be able to catch up. When you talk about Airbnb, the largest hotelier in the world, you find out tax administrations will need a lot of ICT infrastructure to be able to catch up with these big taxpayers. And then in terms of other areas of, like you're looking at the extractive industries, which is typical of the economy of West Africa. Most of the economies are extractive based. Then you look at instances where you need to track, for instance, in the mining industry, where you need to track artisanal miners. Some of our members are actually working in that line using ICT, the GPS system to be able to identify these miners wherever they are. Then the issue of looking at filing your tax returns from the comfort of your room. Someone earlier mentioned about the issue of reducing the cost of compliance. And I agree with that. Compliance should not be a burden for taxpayers. And likewise, it shouldn't also be for tax administration. So it's a win-win thing with ICT. People can sit down in the comfort of their room and pay their taxes, file their returns, while the tax administration can actually with a click of a button, view the processes and then update records. And it's a beautiful story. It's a way to go, but I want to highlight certain issues and challenges that we've got in here that we're working with partners to look at it. So if you're looking at technologies, tax administrations have not been able, in my part of the world and some other people out there, we agree with me, tax administrations have not really been able to hone the technologies, master and then manage them in a cost compliance manner. You find that in most instances, the providers are giving services and then the costs keep increasing. Maybe issue of increasing licenses, fee, and maintenance costs. And those are issues that tax administration will have to sit down. And like Marcio mentioned, it's important that we learn from those who have been able to go through that route and be able to master what they have done. I'm of the opinion that the time is coming for tax administration to be able to develop their homegrown softwares, things that can help them drive the system better. That makes it more cost effective. That makes it something that they can manage in-house. And then also the elephant in the room is the enabling cooperation that tax administration needs from government. You find out most of the tax administrations, they don't work in a silo. They need to work with the Ministry of Finance. That's where you have the policy domicile in most of our member countries. You find out the collaboration has not been the way it should. It has to be something that will lead to a whole of government approach. If tax administration will be reaping the benefits of ICT enhancing operation and bringing about our own profitability in terms of taxes that we collect, there has to be an handshake across government. For instance, the scenario of the register of company, who has the register of taxpayer companies coming on board, not having a firm handshake with tax administration. That's a gap, that's a lacuna that we need to work on. So what am I advocating? For ICT to actually be the bane of our operation, there has to be a government support. And then taking it off from there, I will also talk about the issue of funding available to tax administration. It's not every tax administration that are autonomous. If you're going to acquire technologies, it's something most time capital intensive, and some tax administrations are not autonomous. The source of funding is still not the way it should. That's something that tax administrations will have to work on. Not as if it's not achievable, but it's a long-term work that tax administration will begin to present their stories, make it important for government to understand their strategic role and their strategic need for imbibing ICT. And then quickly, also the issue of looking at where do we begin from. In West Africa, we have countries that are low income, middle income. So you wouldn't assume that everybody has to start from the same place. So the idea should be tax administration should start from wherever they can so that the progress will be gradual. So here the issue of what kind of tax type are we talking about that we need ICT as an enabler? That we need to look at the issue of the sectors we are focusing on. Is it the large taxpayers? Is it the small taxpayer? That way it makes it easy for tax administrators to measure success and be able to bring some new ideas on board. And finally, as I will have to quickly talk about the issue of the staffing of tax administration. It's clear that tax administrations can no longer run away from the fact of employing staffs who are ICT literate. When are those days where you do paper-based administration, paper-based record keeping? Tax administrations, the encouragement we're giving out is tax administration should be employing staffs who have a certain level of ICT skills. For instance, you're talking about the issue of exchange of information, which means we're going to get new data from treaty partners. So if you're having a tax administrator who is not conversant with data analytics, it's as good as winking in the dark. So I agree with her that indeed ICT is the next big thing for tax administration. But how we say it's a matter of taking one step at a time. And I know over time we will get to our desired destination. Thank you for the time, Siet.
Thank you, Babatunde. We appreciate your comments. Let me now go towards the second half of and the last part of our program here. But first of all, there'll be a questionnaire on panelist satisfaction and subject satisfaction. If you could see it, it's a market research slide there. If you could please complete it before we get into our Q&As. Thank you. Okay, well, I hope that we've completed those questionnaires. Let's see the replies we have. And hey, they're really good, good results. So we thank everybody for participating. Don't leave yet. There's still some Q&As left, but we still have 68 participants with us, and that's impressive. Thank you much. Okay, let's go into our last but not least session, and it's the Q&A. And I just have some quick comments regarding the presentations made by all the panel members, and regarding starting with Santiago. And I won't summarize all of it because it was all very informative, which you've already heard. And but some things really stay with me, and the issues that stay with me are the issues primarily of the disparity that we have between some developing countries and others, and as far as the tax administrations. And it certainly proves that technology is a source of aid. I was extremely impressed by Claudia's presentation. I've been a strategic plan fan for many years, and she simply said, you have to embed it in your strategic plan. And if it's not there, it ain't gonna happen. And I think that was just a wealth of information for everybody. Raul, as usual, always is amazing with some of the technology info he imparts upon us. And I gotta admit that we've come a long, long way right now into blockchain. I go back to 1975, my first year as a revenue officer with IRS. And I think I was lucky if I had a little calculator to figure out taxes for taxpayers. But hey, we've made a lot of advances, and only the future could tell us what's there. It's a brave new world coming up. Mancio provided just, again, a wealth of knowledge, and some things I feel that I take home with this is that the knowledge gap, and that we don't need to plan for the long term. Let's plan for the medium term. And the necessary aspect of assisting ourselves. And we don't know what the future is. And we certainly have a lot of questions. And I think possibly 5 months ago, very few of us were on Zoom like we are today. So I think there's a lot to see about that. Last but not least, I will mention that Babatunde mentioned a couple of things that remind me of a meeting we had where Babatunde was present, so was Marcio, and we were developing the strategic plan for the NTO, the Network of Tax Organizations. And the counselor who was heading the session said that something very inspirational. I kept it. He says, when you walk alone, you walk fast. But if you want to walk far, walk together. And I think that's what we're trying, to walk together and see how we could assist each other in improving our tax administrations. And I heard a song the other night on TV, which I hadn't heard in a long time. And it's the new rendition of We Are the World. And we are the world. And I guess that's what we're looking at, assisting each other. So with that, let's move into the Q&As and try to wrap up today's session. The first presentation made by Santiago, and my question is, and Santiago, you listed 5 solutions for developing countries, but let's say I don't have the funds to be able to use them all. What would you tell us would be the ones that are most affordable, and why? Which 2 would you select?
Thank you very much, Socorro. Well, of course, it depends on country-specific needs, but talking in general, I would say that I would choose electronic mailboxes or electronic address and electronic invoices. And why? Because when we are facing the task of tax administrations, 3 things that we need to know are who and where are the taxpayers and what are they doing. And I think that in the context of a developing country, electronic address and mailbox and electronic invoices.
Can I interrupt you a second, Santiago? Could you please turn on your video? I forgot to mention to the panelists to turn on the videos if you can. Thank you.
Sorry, I cannot. I tried before because the host has stopped it.
Exactly. I have the same.
So we go back to our control center, see if they could unstop it so we could see the videos. Okay, well, continue then until we get that resolved. Thank you.
Yeah, being brief, summing up, I would choose electronic invoices, but electronic addresses, electronic mailbox, to try to get to know who and where are the taxpayers, and electronic invoices to improve our knowledge of what are they doing. Thank you.
Hello?
Hello. Okay, in the interest of time, let me go into the next question with Marcio. And I'm not sure if we've been able to clear the videos yet, but we haven't. So
I'm trying to, but David should, because we are blocked by the host. I think David should eliminate this.
okay, well, we'll try to go on with the Q&As then and see if that could be resolved. So let me,
now now I can, exactly.
great.
Yeah,
Okay.
Great.
So now we can see our beautiful faces. Excellent. Let's wait for the other panel members too. Great. There they go.
Oh, good. Very good.
Asia. Okay, Marcio, let me turn it over to you then. And the question that we were looking at was basically in what process or functional areas should tax administrations in developing countries primarily focus on? I know we would like to cover the whole playing field, but if you would tell us, okay, concentrate on these choice fews, which one would you tell us?
For me, in my point of view, we need to work on our soul, our heart, and our minds. And the tax administration, they have to work on their soul. The soul of a tax administration for me is the tax registry. The heart of a tax administration for me is the current account of any taxpayer. And the mind is the risk analysis. Because I think if you look for many countries, and I'm not saying that if you should use a digital box or not, but we need to improve the quality of our tax registry. In many cases, we don't know our taxpayers. We need to work hard on this. And also, you know your taxpayer, you have a good tax registry. Another priority, of course, there's internet, use of internet to tax return, etc. But if you receive a tax return by paper, by internet, anyway, if you don't have a good current account system, it doesn't work. The tax administration doesn't work. We need a a good tax account for all taxpayers. And the third, once you have the whole data, and we have a lot of data, we need data mining, data analysis, also the use of risk analysis models to select good, bad taxpayers to evaluate. So normally I use this paradox. I say salt, heart, and mind. The basic, because in many cases, if you try to construct a good roof, but if you don't have good pillars, the roof will fall in such a moment. So I really believe that we still need to work on the main pillars: tax registry, a good system to receive tax return, and current account. Without a current account, for me, a tax administration doesn't work. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Bachu. Let's go on to Claudia. And Claudia had a wealth of information, and honestly, it would be another webinar just on the subjects she addressed, and they were very vital. And I've got a question for Claudia, and it relates to the support issue. If as a Director General of SIA, of a member of a developing country, I was considering making a significant investment in ICT technology to enhance my tax administration, what would be your advice on the areas to focus on primarily? Let's say you could only focus on three. Which would be the three you should focus on?
Okay, that's a tricky question, Socorro, because there are, of course, many things we can do to improve tax administration. Definitely we need to prioritize, right? That's very important. So based in the experience we had leading the tax authority here in Peru, the focus, in my opinion, should be risk management. To create a tax management model starting with one tax. I will choose one that probably will be the VIT, value added tax, and using the ICT tools to prevent the taxpayers from defaulting. I would choose this because I think among all the choices we have, this one improves tax collection immediately. But as also explained, to get this model of management, there is also a need to invest in improving the relationship with the taxpayers, building competencies on workers, working with other institutions, other entities of the government. So we can be focused on one tax, on one risk model, but at the same time, we need to invest in many different areas to get that model have all the advantages that can offer to improve tax collection.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. Appreciate it. The next question is for Mr. Raul Zambrano. I don't see his camera up there. I guess he's still with us. Raul, you still with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, great. A question to Raul, and because we listen and we hear so much about technology that the tax administrations could use. And I often think, well, what about the other side, the ones that don't want to comply 100%? And there's so much technology available to them. And if taxpayers could develop a software, and let's say very much in the way of the old Zapper system, which to some extent got resolved, are there dangers that we face as tax administrations because there's things that we don't know, and that's always the danger, that we don't know what we don't know, and where tax administrations, unscrupulous taxpayers may want to sort of get under the radar. Is that a possibility?
Well, thank you. It's always like a Willy Coyote and the Road Runner who's chasing bad taxpayers, of course. And if we see the recent past, when the way to avoid paying taxes could be just to be in the informal sector, or to keep a second accounting system, or to keep a second drawer under the desk to put money there. But tax administrations put in place some things like cash registers, and currently in many countries, particularly in Latin America, electronic invoicing system, which make difficult or more difficult for taxpayers to be under that radar. And what did they do? Some of those are using bad, false electronic invoices that look correct. So they are digitally signed. Even the funds go from one account to another, and they could be traced. What did not happen is the exchange of goods or services that meet that reality of a transaction. So those taxpayers are using the system. There are many less of them, and a lesser number of taxpayers that are doing that, but they are still doing things bad. So the tax administrations are putting advanced analytics and machine learning to detect in a very short period of time that those things are happening. So, but what's happening next? As we move forward the use of technology, we are getting closer to the transactions, and that makes more difficult for taxpayers that want to evade to do so. So now we see a new thing that could be important in the future, and that is new forms of payments like cryptocurrency, or what is called initial coin offerings, where we create digital assets in blockchain supported technologies that taxpayers could use, not necessarily with the main purpose of not paying taxes, but to be under the radar of the financial institution, or just to avoid physical frontiers and things like that, but will end with those taxpayers in a position that will facilitate or will allow them to lower their taxes. So that is a thing that tax administration should look forward to understand and invest, so they could follow what closely, particularly large taxpayers, or who should be large taxpayers, people with a lot of money that could use these new technologies to be under the radar.
Thank you, Raul. Very good info. And last but not least, we got a question for Babatunde. It came from one of our participants online. And Babatunde, it reads, Mr. Oladapo made a very relevant remark. The funding needed for investments in ICT are a bottleneck for many tax administrations. And the question is, how can tax administration leadership convey the strategic need for ICTs adequately to the budget holders? That's a heck of a good question. It's all yours, Babatunde.
So I've tried to answer it earlier by chat, and I think one of the things we've learned over time that tax administrations need to do is to learn to tell their own stories, to create better collaborations with other stakeholders. And at WATAF, we have a high-level policy dialogue that we do on an annual basis. And that came about as a result of the need to engage other stakeholders in government so that they will understand the constraints that tax administrations have. So that's something I will I would suggest to tax administration, find a way to bridge the gap between you and those who hold the HACCPs in terms of funding. And one of the things we've emphasized is the tax administration has the ability to raise the fund for government activity. And they need to understand that if you are not sufficiently enabled, they are at risk getting their whole salary. It's just a matter of telling them the story, this is how it is. And we've recorded a couple of success stories in terms of the way annual budgets are being presented. Now we have tax administration sitting with the Ministry of Finance and other stakeholders to actually prepare budgets. Because if you're talking about government expenditure, you need to be sure where the money is coming from. So once we get our legs into that discourse, into that room, hey, I'm the man who is going to produce the money that you need to spend. I need XYZ to be able to do this. So it's about engaging the stakeholders. It's about telling your stories. It's about bringing up the picture in terms of the realities surrounding the funding available to government. Because if they are not funding you, government is at risk. So that's something that tax administrations will have to do by themselves. Tell your own story, engage them, get people to become your champion who will tell your stories within government so that you can have access to the funding that you need to operate.
Great, great. Thank you much. Well, we got to the end, and I guess we'll see now the result of our questions here. And let me go into the replies, and here they go. All this is encouraging and sure gives us a lot of impetus to hold other webinars in the very near future on many other subjects. And I guess with that, we conclude our session, and we thank everybody for their presence, everybody for their assistance, questions, participation. Don't forget, as we've mentioned over the last few weeks and months, the last few months at least, the publication is available online at the CIAT website and other sources. We thank everybody for being present. There was an excellent showing of people. I'm sure it must be bedtime for many, and some are just getting up. So a great day to all.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.